Thank you so much. My name is Erik Milito. I'm the president of the National Ocean Industries Association. It's great to be here. This is my first workshop like this, but I am thrilled to be here. This is a great program. There is certainly a huge gap in education when it comes to understanding energy and how it works and why it's important to our everyday lives. You know, the data point I often think about is the fact that there are 7 billion people on the planet growing every day, and more than 1 billion people without electricity, and even more without reliable access to electricity. So it's such an important part of our daily lives, and it's important to thank Karen, Emily, Mary, and Wendy for the work they do to bridge that gap and to provide really an excellent platform for providing the resources, the content, and a fun way to learn. When you have interaction and you have resources that allow you to use your hands, it's very important, because that's what we do in our industry, and that's how we get things done, by getting out there and working as a team and developing those resources. I throw this up there. This is a presentation I gave in January of this year. I spoke to the Oilfield Energy Center in Houston in January, and I was there to talk about what's in store for 2020. I did not have any predictions as part of this presentation about the pandemic, about remote learning, about the months confined within 4 walls for the 6 of us in our family. We got to know each other very well, but at the same time, I have kids in 8th grade. William, he's the biggest one there with the craziest smile. Helen's on the left. She is 7th grade, and the twins, Jacob and Evie, are in 4th grade. So it's always near and dear to my heart when it comes to making sure our kids have the educational resources and understand fundamental issues like energy and how it impacts us every day. My oldest, just a couple years ago, I was working with him on a lesson about the outer continental shelf, and I was pleased to see that, because that's what I do. I go back looking at my career. I became an expert in the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act, and so it was interesting to see that, because that's, when it comes to offshore, that's where we find a lot of our energy resources here and around the world. In terms of NOIA, I'm new here. I've been here since November. The prior 17 years, I was with the American Petroleum Institute, and at API, I worked on oil and gas, the full supply chain, onshore and offshore. But at NOIA, it's great. We work on offshore oil and gas development, which I'll talk a little bit about, but we also work on offshore wind. We are the National Offshore Industries Association, so we focus on promoting the energy industries that are developing resources in our offshore region, in the Outer Continental Shelf region. And as an organization, we represent this industry, and we promote this industry. But when we do that, we try to make sure that we are finding results that balance the need for U.S. energy resources to fuel our economy, and that we're balancing that with the need to do it safely for our communities, for our workers, and for the environment. So that's why I thought it was important to kind of lay that out. We do have a new mission. I want to throw out our vision. We have a new vision as well, but it really lays out the 3 roles we play. We are the voice. We speak to the media, reporters. We engage on Twitter and LinkedIn, and we get the story out there, the facts about offshore energy and energy in general. And we're also the advocate. We lobby the administration, the Department of the Interior, the Department of Commerce, the White House, and we work with Congress to make sure that we're developing and finalizing laws that make sense for U.S. energy security and for our national security, because when we talk about energy, we have to get it from somewhere, and it's much better to get it here, where we have strong standards and regulations in place to protect our environment and our workers. And we're also a forum. We bring together the industry to work together and advance common interests, and to do it in a way that does promote solutions to big challenges like the climate issue that we face every day. So we do education, outreach, advocacy, and collaboration. Those are the 4 functions we fill. We have about 105 member companies. Hopefully we'll continue to grow, even though we're going through a challenging economic time. I'll talk a bit about how energy follows economic growth. And when we see energy use decline, it often shows you that we're going through a tough time. I throw the objectives up because when you look at the objectives of what we do, they're all tied very closely to education. So we are educating the public and policymakers on our industry, on energy. We're doing that in a way that's designed to promote U.S. energy development. We're doing it in a way where we engage with the government and many other stakeholders. And we want to make sure we have the facts in front of us so that if we are trying to influence public policy, we're doing it based on the facts and the science. And we also, through our membership, bring together many different types of speakers to have a meaningful, diverse dialogue. And one thing we're doing now is focusing on three specific aspects of what our companies do. And it's a new area that some of you may be familiar with, but it's called ESG, environmental stewardship, social responsibility, and corporate governance, so that we're protecting the environment, we're engaging the right way with our workers and communities on the social side, and that we're transparent with investors so that they know what kind of company and what kind of industry they're investing in. So we're doing this as a learning organization. We're working with NEED on ways to make sure our leaders of tomorrow are learning, and we view ourselves as a platform, as a resource for education. And we try to work together to make sure we're contributing solutions in the end to advancing environmental and social responsibility. I like to do my presentations. I like to start off with, why we're developing these energy resources. Why do we do that? What's the need? Well, this is the Department of Energy's Energy Information Administration's data and statistics on the type of energy we use. And there's a lot of talk about getting off fossil fuels. There's a lot of talk about moving to zero carbon emitting types of fuel sources. But we always need to ground ourselves in reality and understand that our economy thrives on and relies on energy. And as we see here, 37% of the US energy comes from petroleum. That's gasoline supplies, that's diesel, that's jet fuel. There's home heating oils. It's used in manufacturing of plastics. And if you think of something like an iPhone or an iPad, it's petroleum-based polymers that give us much of what we have every day. Oil and natural gas, we're called the oil and natural gas industry because we develop those resources in very similar ways, and they're found together. They're hydrocarbons that developed over millions of years in our geology, in our rocks, in our earth. And when we produce one, we generally find the other. And that's why we're the oil and gas industry. And you can see a renewable energy here continuing to grow. And we are an organization that's promoting offshore wind energy. It's a clean source of energy, and it's something that we're finding is more and more sustainable in terms of it being able to provide a consistent source of energy. But you can see the 11% renewable, how it's broken out: geothermal, solar, hydroelectric, wind. But the main thing is we need all the above to be an advanced society and to have a high standard of living. This is a little blurry, but it shows you the projections from Department of Energy out to 2040, and it shows that we're still going to need petroleum, liquids-based energy, as well as natural gas, and it shows you that there's going to be growth in renewables over time, but it's still an economy here in the U.S. That we're going to have that's going to rely on oil, natural gas, and to some extent even coal. And here's where the energy goes: transportation, industrial use, that's our factories, our manufacturing side; residential, our homes. We use electricity, oil, natural gas, nuclear, coal to provide us with our power, with our heating, our cooling, cooking on our stovetop, our hot water tanks that provide us with our hot water for those hot showers. And on the commercial side, those are commercial buildings, office buildings. So you can see we have all these sources of energy that ultimately, on the supply side, meet those important demand needs that we have for our U.S. economy. And this just shows you that over time, as our population increases, we need more energy. Going back to 1950, there was a need for less than 40 quadrillion BTUs. That's the energy unit that is generally used to bring together all the different types of energy. Here you have renewables, nuclear, petroleum, natural gas, and coal. And you can see today we're over 100 in 2019. That's certainly declined this year during the pandemic as the economy has slowed down. But as societies grow, as economies grow, the need for energy and the use of energy grows. And that's what helps lift society and raise standards of living and quality of life, because you need energy to do that. You can see that coal is a resource that has been declining. Natural gas has been increasing. Here in the U.S., petroleum supplies have remained relatively flat, but globally we've seen those grow as well. I show this because what this shows you is what happens when you have an economic downturn like we have during the COVID pandemic. You see crude production here in the U.S. generally increase as the economy is increasing, but when you see a economic downturn, you see crude production fall dramatically, and that's what you see to the far right here more recently. So there's a strong connection between the production of crude oil and the growth and well-being of our overall economy. This just shows you the U.S. If you look globally, it's more of an incline that continues to rise over time. It's because of the recent advancements in hydraulic fracturing, the production we've seen in places like Texas and North Dakota, that we've seen the U.S. be able to increase its production. But there's always a direct connection between the amount of liquids, the amount of petroleum products we use, and how well the economy is doing. So it's not necessarily a good situation when production is down, because that means the economy likely is not doing very well. So when you're talking about oil and natural gas, I'm going to talk about oil and gas first and then get into offshore wind. It's really about the rocks. We find oil and natural gas in the rocks. This is likely what you see here, somebody holding a piece of Marcellus shale. I have a piece here. We have scientists, we have geologists that study this. They look at these core samples in labs, they break it down, and that's a piece of shale, and I'm holding a piece here as well from the Marcellus, and it actually has natural gas and petroleum hydrocarbons trapped in it. These are called tight formations. They're called unconventional formations because for many years we didn't know how to get the oil and gas from that type of rock. But through advancements in hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling, we found ways to break it open and use that sand that's in the mixture of water, sand, and some chemicals in hydraulic fracturing, because the sand is what is used to prop open the fractures in the hydraulic fracturing to allow that oil and gas to release. So sand is a proppant. And so recently it's rocks like this, where we've always known there's been oil and gas, but didn't know how to get it out of it, that have allowed us to become a real energy superpower in the onshore scene. But it all started back in 1859 in Titusville, Pennsylvania, with Drake's Well. This is a picture of Colonel Drake up in Pennsylvania. I grew up not far from here. It's an area where a lot of people get out there and do their outdoor fishing and hunting. Deer season comes along and everybody's up in this area, but it's also the birthplace of the oil and gas industry in our country, 1859. But in the late 1800s, the exploration and the wildcatting that goes on for conventional resources actually expanded to the offshore. You can see here, this is California, Bakersfield, I think it might be Summerfield area, where they started putting the drilling rigs out on piers going out into the ocean. So you saw the origins of offshore oil and gas, 1897, early 1900s, and it's amazing to think about that, because you would have thought that we wouldn't have been advanced at that point in time to be able to produce oil and gas in this way. Offshore, in terms of seeing these types of projects occur kind of out of sight from the coastline, that began in 1947 with Kerr-McGee and this facility here. So we started to see an expansion to developing, exploring for, and finding oil and gas further out because it's all a process of exploring for, finding oil and natural gas in quantities that allow you to develop that field, that reservoir, and you simply run out of places onshore. And we have found offshore to be a very prolific region. If you think about global energy production and global energy demand, before the pandemic, global oil demand was at about 100 million barrels a day. It was at peak levels because population continues to grow and there's a need for more energy. About 25 to 30% of global production comes from the offshore because we've been able to find huge deposits offshore. So we get oil and gas onshore and conventional formations and what are referred to as these unconventional formations. The Marcellus in the Northeast for natural gas. You've got the Eagle Ford and Permian in South Texas and West Texas and New Mexico for the Permian. And then you've got North Dakota, Colorado, all across the country. We've seen a lot of development. But then the offshore region, we've seen most of our production and development in the Western and Central Gulf of Mexico. That's largely been due to political reasons. Some of the original offshore production occurred off the coast of California. We still have small amounts of that, but due to politics, the Gulf Coast has been very supportive of it because as we've seen in a recent study we put out in 2019, the Gulf of Mexico supported 345,000 jobs. So a lot of good jobs, high-paying jobs are supported by the production that we see in the Western and Central Gulf of Mexico, but other coastal areas have been resistant to it. So California is largely getting out of this area. In terms of how it's managed, the first 3 miles off the coast are generally state jurisdiction, so the states run and manage that, but most of it occurs in federal areas, which are further out, 3 miles and beyond, and that's the U.S. Department of the Interior. They manage that, they put the regulations in place, and they allow companies to get out there and get leases so they can develop oil and natural gas in the offshore. From a technology standpoint, there's a technology called seismic, where companies run seismic surveys to see what the rocks look like, see what the geology looks like. Then they can find out if it looks like a region where you would have oil and gas. And if that looks promising, then you move toward developing an offshore field like this. We refer to it as an offshore symphony because it's a huge team, hundreds if not thousands of companies working together to develop these resources. Once you have some good promising prospects based on the data that comes from the seismic, and the companies have these fantastic technologies they use. It's almost like IMAX and it's in 3D. You see the screen, you see the formations. You get out there, and if you're in shallow water, you do some drilling to see if there's oil and gas there. Shallow water is a jackup rig where that's a type of drilling rig you use in 300 to 400 feet of water. You get into deeper waters, you're using a semi-submersible, which is generally towed out there, 4,000, 5,000 feet of water. Modern day drilling is occurring more and more with advanced drill ships, which can be used really in any depth of water, but you could see these types of drill ships used in 7,000, 8,000 feet of water, and they are truly advanced, and they're easy to get on and off location. So when a hurricane comes through, like we saw with Laura and like we see with Sally coming through, they leave. They shut down operations, they shut in the well, and they go back to shore and to dock, and then they go back out when it's over. So this gives you a lot of flexibility. And once you have all your wells drilled, you tie them into production platforms, and you could see the progression over time, where when we started out offshore, we were in shallower water, and we had a fixed platform, and then You tether the platforms, the tension leg platforms to the sea floor to keep them in place and on location. And what you're doing is you're bringing the wells themselves, the production from those wells, through these facilities to separate out the water and to separate the oil and gas, and then to put it into pipelines back to shore. Some of the newest platforms out there in the Gulf of Mexico are spars. They're in very deep water depths, and companies are tying 20 to 30 wells and all that production through those facilities. And they're also using vessels, these floating production storage and offloading systems, as the production facility. They'll take the production from those facilities, they'll load it into a tanker, a shuttle tanker that takes it back to shore, and they'll have multiple tankers doing that to go back to shore. And that is a production facility that, once again, can be disconnected. They can shut into production, and it can go back to shore as well. And one of the greatest advancements that we've seen has been with the subsea production systems. So in the old days, 20, 30 years ago, you would need a production facility for every well. Now it all can be done on the seafloor, where you can have 16, 20, 24 wells all along the seafloor, kind of out of sight, out of mind, all tied into a production facility. And companies are able to do this over distances of 10, 20, 30 miles. So we are an innovative industry. We're high tech, highly advanced. All this is remotely monitored through advanced IT systems, software systems back on the shoreline as well as at the facility. And it's great for us to be able to show this and have this type of day-long program, because you'll learn more and more about all these new advanced technologies. And these are the types of things I think the leaders of tomorrow are going to want to see, because then that's what makes it so interesting and compelling to want to become part of our industry. Just to highlight, the Gulf of Mexico has really been the backbone of U.S. energy production. We've seen these shale regions, the Permian, the Marcellus, and North Dakota really take off, but the Gulf of Mexico has been producing more than 1 million barrels of oil a day since '97, and it's been producing oil resources since the 50s and 60s. And a lot of people don't recognize how important the offshore is, but it really is important for our U.S. economy, because if we're not producing it here, then we're relying on other countries around the world. And I truly believe we have the best companies, the best even regulations in place to do it safely, more so than other parts of the world. We as the U.S. Rely upon about 20 million barrels of oil per day for our economy when the economy is doing well. And we're now producing, when we're in pre-pandemic situation, about 12 to 13 million barrels of that here in the U.S. We've greatly reduced our dependence on foreign sources. Just a short time ago, we were producing 5 out of the 20, and now we're able to produce 12, 13 out of the 20, which puts us in a much better position. It also creates jobs. The Gulf of Mexico generates $5 billion a year for the federal government, about $1 billion a year for conservation programs. So it's a great story. I'll talk to you about wind. Offshore wind is up to this point really been a European phenomenon, but we know we can do it here. And we have a great situation in the U.S. where we have high wind capacities along the Northeast. Both coasts have it, but the great thing about the Northeast is that the continental shelf is large there. It extends for a large area, so it's shallow water, which allows us to put fixed offshore wind turbines in place. And that's what you need to be able to get that offshore wind energy and get that power generation into the electricity grid. You need a place to position them. We also have many states there that have been very supportive, and they're requiring more and more offshore wind to be part of their power generation and their clean energy portfolios. The Northeast is also very close to highly dense and large population centers. And these are areas that don't have access to natural gas. They haven't put in the pipelines to get natural gas up there. They use heavier oils, so offshore wind would be a much cleaner source. They've actually imported natural gas from places like Russia. So offshore wind creates a great opportunity to provide them with the power for their electricity close in off the shoreline with that offshore wind source. And we've seen many companies step up and show interest in developing these areas. Right now, there are only 7 turbines in place, 5 in waters that the state has off the coast of Rhode Island. That's the Block Island project, and 2 in federal waters off the coast of Virginia. Those are kind of like test projects, but we're looking at hundreds, if not thousands, of turbines hopefully being put in place over the next 20 to 30 years, tens of thousands of jobs, and this is billions of dollars of investment that would be coming online. So the Northeast is a great place for this burgeoning offshore wind industry. And we've learned a lot from what's happened in Europe. It's been highly successful there. They've been able to build out efficiencies to make it more cost effective here in the US. And you can see here, this is just one example of a wind turbine. This is the GE turbine. These are massive structures. You see the Washington Monument. This is a wind turbine that's provides 12 megawatts of energy. It's much taller than the Washington Monument and almost as tall as the Eiffel Tower. Highly advanced technologies being put in place. And these are types of technologies we could hopefully soon be seeing put to use in the Atlantic. This shows you a floating turbine. So there are areas like the West Coast where the water is very deep. It's hard to put in a fixed turbine and attach it to the seafloor through that type of foundation. So the industry's developed floating turbines, and we've seen the first floating wind farm put in place offshore Portugal. Even on the East Coast, the Gulf of Maine, this is a technology that can be used there. So in the long term, it wouldn't be just the Northeast. It could be all along the Atlantic coast as well as the Pacific coast, where we could see this new industry put in place, providing lots of jobs through the full supply chain and giving us really reliable, sustainable, affordable energy for our power grid.